Thank you very much for rejoining this session. Can I share in the acknowledgement of country and pay my respects to the traditional owners? I've been asked to introduce myself. It's an easy task. I'm a humble mayor of the Shire of Hornsby, but I did serve in the Australian Parliament for some 43 years. I held numerous positions, but most importantly for me, I had the great privilege of being a minister during the whole of the Howard government, Minister for Immigration, Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Attorney General. These were particularly important roles for the government at the time. As I've been asked to introduce the topic of governance, and then our speakers, I thought I might share with you some thoughts of my own about governance. But I'm not going to offer views on governance in the Pacific. I'm going to offer views about Australia and the challenges we face, because Australia is a country that is quite unique. I often test people. I ask them, which countries do you know have a higher proportion of their population overseas born than Australia? And when I ask the question, I rarely get the right answers. The two that have a greater proportion are Israel and Luxembourg. Can I say that having a society which has one half of its population overseas born, or a child of a person who was overseas born, you are dealing with 50% of your population whose linkages are significantly elsewhere. It is a challenge. I never claim that Australia is perfect, but I think we have demonstrated that you can bring people together from all over the world and you can have effective governance arrangements. Our governance arrangements have been the subject of a great deal of discussion and will continue to be the subject of discussion. But I have a preamble to the Australian Citizenship Act which I wanted to share with you, because it says this of Australia: citizenship represents the full and formal membership of the community of the Commonwealth of Australia. Australian citizenship is a common bond involving reciprocal rights and obligations, uniting all Australians while respecting their diversity. Persons on whom Australian citizenship is conferred enjoy these rights and undertake to accept these obligations by pledging, first, loyalty to Australia and its people; secondly, sharing their democratic beliefs; thirdly, respecting their rights and liberties; and finally, by upholding and obeying the laws of Australia. We acknowledge that people do come from different cultures, different religions, often of different races, but you can come together and you can have governance arrangements that provide just and fair outcomes for all. And I think that is what governance is all about. How you achieve it often is the subject of very considerable discussion and sometimes contest. These are issues that have been discussed amongst our friends in the Pacific. I've been asked to introduce to you today significant speakers who will be able to contribute on what is happening elsewhere in the Pacific and share with us the governance arrangements that they are dealing with and some of the challenges they may face. Our first leader is going to contribute from a French perspective, but of course France has a number of dependencies in the Pacific. I often joke about the fact that they've had a mayor in Noumea that has been there longer than I think anybody else I've known over my time in public life. I don't know whether it'll be an example to me, but the French ambassador, Jean-Pierre Thébault, is going to speak to us. He has been ambassador here from 2020. He's been previously involved, I noted, in an interesting title, Ambassador in Charge of Preparation of the French Presidency. A very challenging role, I suspect. I noted that he was earlier involved in preparing, importantly, for prime ministers, but he's served in missions for France in many places. I look Ambassador at Large for the Environment in Paris. He'd been in Hong Kong and Macau. He was Deputy Head of Mission in Tokyo, Councillor for Public Sector and Civil Service in Paris, Political Councillor at their embassy in Berlin, Councillor to the Minister for Regional Planning and the Environment in Paris, again, Permanent Mission to the United Nations in New York, Deputy Head of Mission, the French Embassy in Zagreb, the European Monitor Mission in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania and Croatia. You can see he's had an enormous number of tasks to fulfill, but he's earned a number of very important distinctions. He's a Knight of the Legion of Honour in 2014, an Officer of the National Order of Merit in 2019. He has a BA in History from Sorbonne University. He's fluent in many languages. He has 2 children and he's going to address us. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Philip. It's very kind of you to quote my career, but what is important today is that we will be speaking about the Pacific. And it's an honor to intervene alongside such distinguished guests and so many participants from the Pacific family and abroad, because the Pacific is a theme that now raises a much wider interest, and it's long time due because there are challenges here, but there are also enormous possibilities. And those possibilities are in the Pacific island states. They are called very often small island states, which is a wrong terminology. They should be called large ocean states, which would be more representative of their importance. But the question of the size is not what matters most. It's the vibrancy of the communities. It is the fact that it is a very tightly knitted network of relationship, of culture, of ways of proceedings, the Pacific way, which has to be respected, to be known, especially from outsiders when they come into the region, because this matters. Efficiency of action is not only to propose beautiful projects, it's also to respect the population which are there, eventually recipients of the projects, and ensure that they are fully on board. France is a nation of the Pacific, and we are proud of being a part of this family. We are proud to belong to the region, and being part of the region comes together with great responsibilities. Responsibilities towards our citizens. First, there is more than 500,000 of French citizens in the Pacific, and we care about those territories. We need to provide them security, all kinds of security, from physical security, but also economic security, and monitor also the large territories, the EEZ that is around these territories. But together with those direct responsibilities towards our citizens comes responsibilities towards our neighbors. This is the Pacific way. We have to face common challenges. The consequences of COVID-19, obviously, climate change, which represent an existential threat to the region, the increasing risk of natural disasters, but also the challenge of lifting the one Pacific family members who are still experiencing challenges in terms of economic development, in terms of youth employment, in terms of youth capacity building. This is a challenge that we need to address together. We have a vast EEZ, I mentioned, and this is a blessing, but together with these large oceans part of our nations of the Pacific comes also responsibilities. And we must work towards solutions, especially confronting natural disasters, illegal fishing and biodiversity loss. We feel encouraged through our experience and because of the links that we naturally have with the Pacific to sometimes take the lead internationally, but not alone, together with our partners and friends and neighbors of the Pacific, in close cooperation. Last year in July, the Honorable José Natano, Prime Minister of Tuvalu and then Pacific Islands Forum Chair, together with President Macron, co-chaired the 5th France-Oceania Summit, a regular meeting which is gathering the leaders of the region. And many initiatives were announced, but one of the most significant probably at that time, which is today delivering, is the announcement of the creation of a Coast Guard network for the South Pacific. an initiative taken together with France, but it's not only France, it's about the buy-in of all the countries of the region, a network created for the Pacific states to protect their most important assets, the maritime area. And this is just an example of initiatives we have taken together with our neighbors. The governance of oceans is indeed vital for the region, and it's a point I would like to specifically stress. We share this priority with all the Pacific states family. It's often, because this is probably one of the subjects that most matters for the future of the development of the region. We have hosted, as France, the One Ocean Summit in February, but we announced also this year our readiness to host, together with Costa Rica, the next United Nations Ocean Conference in 2024-25. We are considering also initiative to offer a concrete response to the island's vital needs, together with the island states, but also together with the international community which we want to mobilize. While the region also faces a recurrent disaster, France has always stood alongside its Pacific neighbors in these difficult moments. The most recent example being the response we provided in the wake of the volcanic eruption in Tonga in January 2022. We were in a position to do so thanks to our armed forces positioned in the region, and pre-position also humanitarian depot and reserves in New Caledonia and French Polynesia. And we acted there together also with the local government of these territories, which is another way to showcase the fact that solutions based on the experience of the populations of the regions matters and might make a difference. We celebrate this year the 30th anniversary of the France arrangement, the mechanism that has allowed us to coordinate our regional emergency responses with Australia and New Zealand since 1992. As the current chair of this mechanism, we aim at further improving our response capabilities by reducing the environmental impact on our emergency operations. But doing so, answering to natural disasters is only mending some of the problems of the region. What we need also is to work for the future. To working for the future is developing solutions not only with France, but also working with the EU. And this is a very important element of our policy towards the region and together with the region. Bringing the EU more and more in the region, developing new projects towards the region, involving and fully associating the countries of the region. This is something that the EU has now committed, and we are proud as France, as chair of the EU during the first semester of this year, to have contributed to a major decision where the EU will now shift its attention towards the region and increase what it did in the past further. One of the examples being that the EU has already earmarked over almost €1 billion for the years 2021 up to 2027 period to mobilize in the region. Last but not least, I'd like to stress the fact that for us, what is major is to work together with the regional organizations, to work together with the Pacific community as it is. We've tried to be full part and parcel of this organization by in particular encouraging our territories, New Caledonia, Polynesia, to be part of the Pacific Island Forum. And we are proud that they are participating actively in this very important organization. We are members of the regional programs which address the needs of the Pacific, and we will strive in the future to further develop those programs by contributing for much significant amounts in their action. We want also to promote international programs which are addressing those needs of the region. That's the example of the Kiwa initiative, which has gathered about 100 million in the recent years, and we intend to further expand the money that we will put into this. We want also the French Development Bank to be more and more present and addressing the needs of the region. This bank is the only Western bank a European bank which has been present uninterrupted since 75 years in the region. It's already mobilizing large amounts in support of initiatives, and we want to further develop it. Already, we contribute to the construction, for example, of the campus of the National University of Vanuatu. We are considering further projects in PNG in the field of energy transition and biodiversity, in Fiji of bank guarantees and infrastructures. Last but not least, I'd like to mention the French Armed Forces in New Caledonia and French Polynesia. They work closely with all the members of the Pacific region. They work not only in terms of disaster relief support, but they take part also to the definition of the peacekeeping organizations and exercise in the regions in order to contribute not only to the protection of economic resources, but also contribute to the security of the region, together, once again, with each and every state. I'd like to conclude, I've been a little too long probably, but by saying what is the French point of view on the Pacific. The Pacific is a closely knitted community. It has cultural values. It has communities which have a long experience of their territories. We are proud to be one of the members of the family. We are proud of our community and population in the region. We think they are assets in order to cooperate meaningfully with the countries of the region. We acknowledge those challenges which are environmental, which are also challenges of development, but above all, the challenge of climate change. This is the task where we think as France that the international community must mobilize. Before all, where we need to show not only good words, but also concrete action, where we need to deliver solutions, where we need to make an example of the solidarity between developed countries and developing countries, where we make an example that it is possible to act and to act swiftly and concretely together with the population, together with the nation of the Pacific, respecting their specificities, respecting their way of proceeding in order to deliver efficient solutions. This is the Pacific way. This is the way France understands the Pacific. We are proud to be part of the family, and because we have the chance of having this long experience, we want really to further develop our action in the region, involving as many external supporters, especially the European Union, but in full respect of what is the Pacific and together with the Pacific. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and we'll look forward to the discussion that follows, but we appreciate your explanation of French engagement in the Pacific. Can I say what a pleasure it is now to move to our next speaker, Peter Kenilorea Jr., the member for East RR in the National Parliament of the Solomon Islands. I might amuse him by saying I was at a debate for university students this week, and one of them was a student who said he knew you well. I don't know whether you remember JD, who is studying at the University of New South Wales, but he spoke very fondly of you. And he was a great debater, I might say. But Peter Kenilorea, of course, was elected to the Parliament of Solomon Islands in 2019, and he's been very much involved in a number of organisations, the Organisation of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, the Parliamentary Assembly and co-president of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, the first Solomon Islands MP to serve in these roles. He has previously held positions as Permanent Secretary of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, External Trade in the Solomon Islands, was International Civil Servant to the United Nations Secretariat in New York from 2000 to 2017. And he's held positions in the UN Office of Legal Affairs, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the UN Department of the General Assembly and Conference Management, the UN Office of the High Commission for Human Rights, the UN Office of the High Representative for at least developed countries, landlocked developed countries and small developing states. Enormous contribution that he's made in those various roles. He's been employed by the Solomon Islands government previously in the Attorney General's chambers, was employed by Jennifer Corrin, barrister, and he's obtained an LLB from the University of Waikato in New Zealand, which he attended, and also an LLM in International Law from the University of Nottingham. We look forward, Peter, to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that kind introduction. And it's indeed an honor to be here to share this panel with such distinguished colleagues that are also here with us, speaking about an interesting and very relevant topic for us in the Pacific on governance. I will be focusing my contributions today on the parliamentary side of governance and perhaps draw from Solomon Islands' own experience in that particular context. As I'm a new member of parliament as well, so I am also got perhaps a perspective that is perhaps from the newer membership of parliament, but I think it's one couched over long observation of Solomon Islands, and sometimes it's better to observe things from afar as well, rather than being in the country or in the hot seat, as it were. I think it's fair to say that Pacific Island democracies are relatively young, comparatively young, compared to perhaps other more established democracies around the world. And it's fair to say perhaps that we are still finding our way in terms of what is democracy for us? What does it mean? What does it entail? How will we implement it given our context? And indeed, in the Pacific, it's clearly true that we are united as islands by certain geographics. The ocean unites us rather than divides us. That is something that is very much recognized. At the same time, there is quite specific and unique cultures, even within us. Our islands and the countries are quite proud of their own unique cultures as well. And I think that also has an impact in the way that we look at democracy and how we view it. We are made up, of course, of constitutional monarchies here in the Pacific. And then, of course, there are republics as well here in the Pacific. There's a kingdom as well with us in the Pacific. So that gives us a flavor of the different contexts that we are facing in terms of the current context of democracy and governance that we have to continue to grapple with almost on a daily basis. But parliamentary democracy is one that I feel has a key role to play in terms of our functioning nations and our statehood and our sovereignty moving forward as well. I think we can excuse ourselves sometimes for being young and still learning the ropes, as it were, and perhaps getting used to the systems. And that's perhaps to be expected from us. And we're learning from more developed democracies. But I feel that it's totally a different matter to come across deliberate or authoritarian tendencies that you cannot excuse as learnings or going through and trying to make democracy work. I feel that that is something that is creeping in into some of our countries, and particularly in Solomon Islands. You know, we have shared values with democracies and other democratic countries, and our shared identity actually comes from that democracy and the governance that we share. These have fundamental features that I think all of us can agree on, that when you see it, you can tell that, yes, that is a democracy, that is a democratic country. But in the Solomon Islands context, we passed an anti-corruption law, for example, the last parliament, and that hasn't yet been implemented. We have a chair, but I'm hearing that even he has problems getting a desk or printer in the office, poorly funded. And I would like to think deliberately so by the current government, not allowing that office to do its function is also allowing corruption to continue to fester and grow. Dissent or criticism, no peaceful protests are allowed now in Solomon Islands. It was used as a pretext for COVID, but now that COVID is gone and our state of public emergency have been lifted, it's still very difficult, and no one's been given permission to protest peacefully. And people are getting frustrated here. There's a high dependency now on China. The Solomon Islands, for example, its biggest trading partner is China, as many democracies around the world. This was even before we made the switch from Taiwan to China. 70% of our logs, which is the biggest foreign income earner for Solomon Islands, go to China. And now this dependency has now moved into not just economic, but the security dependency with the security treaty that was signed with China. Once again, the dependency just highlights our vulnerability to one partner in particular. And this is something that I'm very, very concerned about in terms of our dependency that we seem to be getting into with one powerful partner. Non-accountability and lack of transparency is creeping up into our government systems. Now, public servants are getting tight-lipped and not being as transparent as they used to be. Our public provider in terms of broadcasting has been reined in and are now self-censoring in terms of the news that they provide. This is a very concerning development for a young democracy like Solomon Islands. And I think it's fair to say that in democracy, there are a variety of apples, but you can still recognize them as apples. You can still recognize them as a democracy, although they might have different flavors. But still, it's still a democracy. It's not what I'm feeling now is happening here, particularly in the Solomons, that there's apples and coconuts. There's a clear difference now between what is democracy, and it's not recognized as such anymore. I think the identity that we share needs to be recognized as such. And one of the big ones is our democratic governance and the need for it to be strengthened. And here, again, we're looking towards Australia, France, USA, other democratic powers. Of course, democracy is not perfect. We know that. But the ideals upon which it is built is something that we share. And I feel all human beings share, even Pacific Islanders. Freedom, liberty. These values that we know even before democracy hit our shores. And that is something that we feel is the foundation of democracy. And so the shared identity and the shared values that we have here in terms of governance must be seen together as part and parcel of our work moving forward together. We will continue to need the support of democratic loving countries, especially to stem the tide towards authoritarianism that is now getting a grip here, that is deliberately now being steered towards that path by certain leaders in our countries who are very happy to walk that path. But we need to also continue with the work that we're doing with the concrete outcomes in this space, where shared wins is something that comes from shared values and shared identities. And shared wins, I'm talking about practical issues here. I think the ambassador for France just mentioned climate change. That is something that is very, very up there in all priorities of our governments. The ocean space that is so large that indeed we should be called large ocean states. And that is something that we continue to look forward to, genuine and durable partnerships in those spaces that we move forward as we walk along. The soft side of democracy needs to be supported by the harder side as well, in terms of support for continued work, including infrastructure, support, climate proofing, and all these issues that are part and parcel of a healthy democratic society. But the shared wins is definitely different from win-win. Shared wins, I feel, is not win-win. Win-win, as in you win and I win, is different from shared wins. With shared wins, we win together and we share the fruits of that win together. And it's not adversarial or it's not even pre-planned. It just happens because we share the same value and the same identity. Thank you very much again, Philip.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I fondly remember all of my times in the Solomon Islands, and We've had many opportunities to come together at different times, and yours was a very challenging address, which we welcome. Can I move next to Brenda Heather-Latu, who is going to speak to us. She's a partner of Latu Lawyers, a director of the ICDP, a former Attorney General of Samoa. I have to declare an interest. My daughter Kirsty, I think, was with you as a youth ambassador at an earlier point in time, and I've got grandchildren who are part Samoan, so dare say I have particular interests as well. But Heather is a former Attorney General, partner of Brenda, a former Attorney General, and she's been working in the Crown Law Office in New Zealand from 88 to 96, was appointed Crown Counsel in 1991. In 1996, she went to Samoa under the New Zealand Aid Scheme as the Principal State Solicitor in the Attorney General's Office. In 1997, she was appointed Attorney General in Samoa, a post she held for 3 consecutive terms from 1997 until 2006. She's also an Honorary British Consul to Samoa, serving the Judicial Office of the World Rugby, not a title I'm very much familiar with, I have to say. She's also a board member of Habitat for Humanity New Zealand and holds the chiefly title of Taulapapa from the village of Whakapaua in Samoa. I'm going to have to be challenged by these, but she's a highly respected leader, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say, Brenda. Thank you very much.
Talofa lava from Samoa. Thank you, Philip, for your kind words. And yes, you absolutely have a Samoan aspect of your lives and your family's lives. And Kirsty Ruddock was a wonderful youth ambassador and continues to be an amazing lawyer. Can I also greet you as a former Attorney General and law officer in your past life? Can I also acknowledge my fellow esteemed thought leaders, Your Excellency, Monsieur Thébault, as well as the Honourable Peter Kenilorea Jr. Greetings to all of those that are on this virtual summit. And yes, I have different clothes from the ones that I wore this morning when I welcomed you for the Pacific. I think we have just witnessed an extraordinary and an exceptional week in global history. And it's not only because I'm the Honorary British Consul, but extraordinary and exceptional in equal measure. We have 4 billion, I think, souls around the globe joined the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland to bid farewell to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. It's an occasion never before seen, I think, in all our lifetimes, nor likely to be repeated in such scale and pageantry. The repeated themes from the public messages of condolence were of dedicated service, of commitment to her Commonwealth of Nations, and of the Queen's deep and abiding faith in God. I think we all have in the Pacific, we all experience those same traits and the importance of them in our particular communities. I think it's for this address anyway, it's important to place where we are in the Pacific at the moment in some sort of context. And I would like to start with the words of the Dean of Westminster, as he was talking about Her Majesty and the bidding and the order of service. And he said this: with gratitude, we remember her unswerving commitment to a high calling over so many years as Queen and Head of the Commonwealth. With admiration, we recall her lifelong sense of duty and dedication. With thanksgiving, we praise God for her constant example of Christian faith and devotion. And with affection, we recall her love for her family and commitment to the causes she held dear. As we're talking about governance, and particularly for the countries who are members of the Commonwealth took a prominent role in the last 2 weeks. Obviously, the Commonwealth core values and principles were part of the entry fee that nations paid to join that particular grouping of nations with that relationship with the British Crown. And in those values lay the values that were the foundation stones for most of our democracies. And those included human rights, peace and security, freedom of expression, the rule of law, good governance, separation of powers, tolerance, respect and understanding, and many, many others. These shared values define and direct our civil identity. And as Peter says, we are relatively young democracies. However, it's our cultures that identifies us in the vast diversity that you find in the Commonwealth and the United Nations. And it's those cultures which actually define our uniqueness. Shared identity in the Pacific has, I believe, historically meant that we have, as new democracies, tried to distance ourselves and actively work to reduce the risk of autocracy, oligarchy and dictatorship in our newly independent states. We have had varied success and some failures. It's been when we failed to protect and hold safe those democratic values and governance principles that there has been a shift towards autocratic and tyrannical behaviour in our region, led by Pacific strongmen who universally have the traits of being uncompromising, aggressive, domineering, and belligerent. And in the course of their time in power and in office, have variously suspended our constitutions, sacked or suspended our judges, undermined the rule of law, and ignored the principles of good governance. All this while they control and play greedily with public funds and public resources and lift corruption as the prevailing value during their time in power. These strongmen have taken power in our Pacific states periodically and behave in stark contrast to the Pacific statesmen and stateswomen who have championed democracy, often prepared the way for democracy, and fought for regional unity. What the Pacific needs now, and always will, are development partners who support the Commonwealth democratic values which they model in their domestic politics, and in doing so declare their affinity with Pacific states in the observance of those values, that they are faithful and deliberate in upholding such values which protect democracy, the rule of law and human rights in all our lands. Some of the most treasured and memorable traits of Her Late Majesty was her constancy by word and in deed, her faithfulness to her values and her humanity in difficult times. And many of us can remember that the first message that was often given in times of cyclone and earthquake to many of our countries was a message from Buckingham Palace. Samoa has recently undergone a period of political instability and uncertainty. However, but for the pillars of democracy, in particular the rule of law and independent judiciary, we steered through those tough times with our nation intact and relying on Samoan culture to act to prevent civil unrest. Now more than ever, the Pacific needs its leaders to heed the science, be innovative in the way they protect and strengthen our economies, and heed the voices of their people. The waters of the Pacific are lapping, as they've always done throughout time, on shores which are attracting great geopolitical interest. They're lapping with greater volume and increasing vigour on our shores. Our shared identity with our historical links and the sharing of peoples and cultures within this region in particular allows us to draw strength from each other. For it is when we are isolated and alone that we lose our way. Ours has been a voyage of discovery, settlement, and peace. Modelling common values by example, we can now say, was an Elizabethan mantra. And the test of our unity is now at hand. By land, by sea, and air. And what will be the Pacific's default setting? This week has been a great opportunity for introspection and reflection. And as we thought and think about what was good and unique about Her Majesty and her reign, what impact did it have on our own lives and our own sense of responsibility and duty, wherever and whatever we do and are? What does service, commitment, and faith look like in our islands, in our countries? How will our communities survive the current onslaught of global challenges? Might I suggest, after spectating for the last 2 weeks and hearing so much said about those values, that perhaps a firm core grounded in the values of democracy, human rights, and the observance of the rule of law is a great start. Being vigilant when any one of those things or institutions are challenged and attacked. Being engaged in regional and international groupings of countries which share those values. Relying on the goodwill and cooperation of our development partners for support and stability, and our affinity underpinned with the countries and island states which have similar traits to us. And then we have the individuals, the people that we vote for, the people that we appoint to public office, that they are personally committed to peace, prosperity, and unity. During our recent troubles last year in 1991, there were T-shirts that recorded our mantra to get us through. And it was, you could get a T-shirt with "I stand for the rule of law," or "I stand for democracy," or "I stand for the judiciary." Pacific people need to stand up to protect the values that protect them, and stand up in the face of challenges to peace and prosperity in our land. I'd like to thank Catherine Fritz-Kalish of GAP, who is hosting this virtual program, and thank all of you for your time.
Thank you, Brenda, for a very compelling address. I've worked out now I've got to complete my wardrobe with a new T-shirt. Obviously, a very compelling message, but equally important. Can I thank you, Brenda? Can I thank Peter Kenilorea? Can I thank Jean-Pierre Thébault for participating in this part of the program? It's been very good to have you all here. I knew it was going to be challenging, and I didn't want to be offering a lecture from Australia as to how governance issues ought to be addressed, but I wanted to outline to you that we do have our challenges as well, and that's equally important when we're discussing these matters. Can I thank again all the attendees, equally important that you are involved. Can I thank our sponsors, Global Access Partners, GAP. We very much value them being with us. DXC Technology, we thank you as well. The OECD, we appreciate you being a sponsor as well. I'm told now that I have to invite you to participate in a Zoom discussion. This is very challenging because I've got to learn how to play with these bits of equipment as well. But I'm told that the steps are as follows. You should click back to Virtual Lobby on the top left corner of your screen. Once in the Virtual Lobby, you need to click onto Zoom Discussion, the red button at the top of the screen. Please keep the Virtual Lobby page open at all times in your browser, and I hope that advice is helpful. We look forward to coming back and participating in the discussion shortly. Thank you.